Right now on Tech Radio, artificial intelligence and a very real tragedy.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. You're welcome to episode 1082, looking at the 7 biggest stories of the week, including a successful launch at last for SpaceX, a good quarter for Nvidia, and a preview of the iPhone 17 Air. Plus, we get a brilliant insight into bringing second life to devices beyond repair with our guest, Emma Clarke, Managing Director of Orivium.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me as always is our Editor-in-Chief at Tech Central, Niall Kitson. Before we start, I should say that the first story this week does contain discussion of suicide. If this topic affects you, please call the Samaritans on 116 123 day or night, or Pieta House at 1800 247 247, or by texting help to 51444. So Niall, tell me about this story because it's extraordinary.
It is, and probably not the last time we're going to have this conversation, most unfortunately, because this will be the second time this year alone that we're doing so. So let's look at what happened. A 16-year-old young man by the name of Adam Rain, I want to say, was overusing ChatGPT. If you want to point to how often it was used during the day, he would very often exchange around 650 messages with ChatGPT during the day.
Okay.
Right?
Now, I know people like this. They treat an AI, and I'm not naming anyone in particular, but they treat it as like a friend. Oh, I'll just check with, or I'll see what the AI thinks. You know, a lot of more people are doing that.
And this is a point that was raised when ChatGPT moved from version 4.0 to 5. People were saying, well, hang on, I don't like using ChatGPT 5 because it's not friendly. You know, it's not giving me answers in a way that is palatable to me. And this is kind of the downside of receiving answers that are delivered not only in a palatable way, but in a way that kind of reinforces your thinking. So if you are already at risk, if you are already struggling with your mental health, if you're struggling with problems like suicidal ideation, where, you know, basically sort of what we're asking ChatGPT, what would be the most effective way for me to commit suicide? ChatGPT probably isn't going to say, don't do it. It's going to say, well, looking at the literature, XYZ, right? And OpenAI itself has admitted that the longer a conversation goes on with ChatGPT, the longer those interactions take place, the more time potentially you are going down a rabbit hole of biased information or hallucinations, the more likely it is for the guardrails they have put in place will basically fall away. So questions that you might not get an answer to, for example, as I just said, you know, what is the most effective way to commit suicide? You might not get an answer the first time you answer, the first time you ask, depending on how you phrase the question. But it becomes more likely that you will get an answer you find, for want of a better term, appropriate or useful, the longer that interaction goes on. So as a result, the Rain family are taking OpenAI and the CEO, Sam Altman, to court over OpenAI's lack of effective oversight And how worried is OpenAI about this case? Well, of the 650 daily messages that were being input by Adam, OpenAI has at the time said, we are not releasing 40 of them. Right? As a result, over this decision, their head of safety at the time, let me just grab up their name here, decided that they weren't going to stick around, decided that this was enough for them to leave the company. And it's not just OpenAI that have had a look at this problem. Microsoft themselves, who are a massive investor in OpenAI, as we know, they've put more than 10 billion into OpenAI, said that they agreed that as these conversations go on longer, parts of the model safety training do degrade, and that there was a risk of people, experience psychosis or mania-like episodes, the reinforcing of delusional thinking and paranoia. These are, very real mental health risks. And when you don't have a steadying voice, if you don't have an actual therapist, if you don't have someone that you can actually talk to, this is tremendously dangerous. And I said this is a conversation that we've had before this year. You might remember the case of Sewell Setzer the third, if not by name, then certainly by what happened. His mother is suing a company called Character.ai, which use what they call virtual friends as chatbots, which can be sort of characters from TV shows or computer games or anything like that. Very similar style of conversation and a very similar outcome. So it's kind of the start of this action. We'll see where it goes. I think this is a massive challenge to AI as we know it. OpenAI said they're going to look into things like stronger guardrails around sensitive content, around risky behaviors, which is pretty much addressing directly what had happened here, but also parental controls as well. So as I said, we'll see where it goes. What's your reaction?
Well, it's a very serious topic. I don't want to comment on that, but what I'm thinking of in my head is there's a phrase that you use about the Americans. They build it fast and risky, or what's that phrase?
Build fast and break things.
There you go. Build fast and break things. And I think that's kind of where we are very much with AI, very much like the early days of the internet, where things were happening fast and people weren't sure and they were worried about credit card payments and and everybody was trying to figure it out. I think we are quite possibly in that phase with AI at the moment. That's one thing. I wanted to ask you about what Sam Altman said last week. Now, we're finished with the suicide side of things, but Sam Altman was referring to this phase of build it fast and break things, but also, as in the early days of the internet, we had a bubble. And Sam Altman, one of the creators or the big guys behind AI, is saying that we're also in an AI bubble.
Yeah, this was reported by The Verge. Apparently, there was a conversation with Sam Altman and a panel of journalists, and he effectively came out and said, well, effectively, he did come out and say that, look, we are in a bubble. OpenAI will be fine. I mean, we're the guys behind the technology. We'll be fine. The likes of Nvidia and Intel will probably be fine. But we're going to see an awful lot of companies go to the wall because AI isn't a solution for everything. And there was a good quote here that he came out with. When bubbles happen, smart people get overexcited about a kernel of truth. I think that's the nub of pretty much any bubble. And I think we do have an awful lot of very smart people who are seeing applications for AI, but are they commercially viable? That's that's the question. Are they commercially viable? Is this something that people are going to try and play a long game with and end up losing an awful lot? Is it something, people are going to build a company quickly and look to get acquired as quickly as possible?
There's probably an awful lot of that going on, and it does. I mean, it has so many echoes of the early days of the internet in the late 90s and the early noughties, and of course the crash that we had there. Another AI story this week, and again, it's another thing where we're kind of building fast and breaking things, where AI is using creative works by people without permission in order to train itself. There's been another key ruling this week.
Another key ruling. I mean, the story so far on this is that whenever authors have gone in front of the courts and said, look, this large language model has clearly been trained using our copyrighted material. I can point to you bits, that have come, either directly from my work or, suspiciously close. And the judges have been like, yeah, but it's a transformative use. It's not, people aren't using large language models to read your stuff. Just your stuff happens to be in it. It is a transformative use. It's not piracy. It's something else. However, earlier this week, Perplexity has come to an agreement with the initial class on this is 3 authors who brought this case, but there are up to 7 million claimants involved in this. So, if you suspect or if you found evidence that your material has been used in training a large language model, you potentially have something to gain in this. However, 7 million people is a very large class. If you divide 7 million by what is being allocated as part of a settlement, and there is a settlement in the works, one that has been approved in principle, which means that Perplexity has agreed to, spend X amount on a settlement to avoid going to court, and the class will divide it up amongst themselves. Now, a class of 3, I mean, that sounds pretty cha-ching. A class of 7 million, not so much. So it's going to be interesting to see how big the class is in the end, because would that represent an element of forward thinking? Would that element show an element of, this is my copyright and it was violated?
I think you're all being very, you're what do they call it? The song, you're being a gold digger there, Niall. He is a gold digger. I don't think this thing, it's not about money. The money is irrelevant. It's the principle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the important thing.
If 7 million people were to join the class, I'm just, we'll just look at the worst case scenario.
Yep.
They end up getting 7 cents each.
Yep.
You're happy. You personally would be happy with that as an outcome.
If it stops the AI taking my work, yes, I would. I wouldn't care about the money. It's the principle. It's nothing to do with the money. The money is irrelevant. All right. The where the money could come in is as a deterrent. So kind of if you've got 7 million claimants and each of them are claiming, say, 10,000 each. I don't even want to know that is. But the company will be sitting there looking, oh my God, we've got a $7 trillion case against us or whatever. We need to take this seriously. In that sense, but it's still only a tool. I think it's the principle more than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's the thing. If it is principle, do you allow yourself the right to have your material withdrawn from a large language model? If
that's what you want, yes.
Yeah.
You know, if they took it without your permission, you should be able to have it withdrawn.
I mean, the sort of a different view of it would be, okay, in using my work to help train your model, you have created a multi-million dollar business without my permission. I'm entitled to some recognition.
Or without, Then you've got 7 million people to thank every time you answer a question. That's going to go bananas. That's not going to work. Look, the whole thing about it, creative work and stuff like that, is you own the creative work, but there is a process for your creative work where it is allowed to be used. And there are certain samples so that if somebody is reviewing your book, they're allowed to use a paragraph or two in order to make a point about what they thought about your book. All right. But they cannot reprint an entire paragraph or an entire chapter of your book or the entire book. With music, it's the very same thing. The copyright is there to allow other people to do their own versions of a song. They're quite entitled to do that, but they have to pay the royalty, and that's what the whole copyright is set up for. At the moment, again, it's going back to what we were saying about kind of, build it quick and break things. AI is just going in and going, right, okay, I don't recall copyright law, which was written 20 years ago or last updated 20 years ago, mentioning AI. I'll have it all. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's where I see where it is. Anyway, listen, we could, that's legal mumbo jumbo, and you'd be into that for a million years. You mentioned Perplexity, all right? There's another story out this week, including Perplexity and also Mistral, which is kind of the French version of an AI and stuff like that. And Apple, because Apple are kind of, I think they've given up on doing their own AI, and they are desperately looking for somebody with an AI to work with. All right. That's the idea. But even within Apple, there are people who are going, great idea. And then there are other very influential people going, no.
Yeah, it's an interesting bit of tension within Apple. I mean, if you want to try Mistral, you can download LeChat, which is the chatbot for that. What's the chatbot for Perplexity? Is it just...
It's just Perplexity. Yeah, I have it on my phone. It's just called Perplexity. Yeah.
Okay. So the idea is that, Apple Intelligence is powered in part by ChatGPT. And we all know Apple likes to do things Apple's way. They don't necessarily like relying on third partners because Apple, very often, they're not the first to market, but they are the person to market that does it well. That does it in a very unique way, that does it in a way that people actually get excited about, right? The feeling is, okay, well, if we're using the same tech as everyone else, like kind of, is this really what we want? Also, Apple Intelligence hasn't shown up the way that we want it to. So we need a solution, and we need something novel. So the services chief inside Apple is a gentleman called Eddie Q, and he reckons that either Mistral or Perplexity would be pretty good targets for acquisition by Apple. Now, on the other side of the aisle on this is Tim Cook and Craig Federighi, who we know as the head of software and the CEO, reverse those. And they're saying no. But if you look at a history of companies that Apple decided not to acquire and ones that they did, I think there's an argument that Apple just doesn't have a fantastic history when it comes to high profile acquisitions. Like if you look at the companies Apple actually turned down, well, maybe not turned down, but certainly didn't pursue as well as it could have. They didn't go for Netflix. They went for their own thing. Their own in-house. They kept iTunes, and now we have Apple TV. They also were looking at Tesla briefly. Now we know that, of course, that Apple had their Project Titan, which was to be their self-driving car, and that was shut down. It was decided that good phraseology coming up. It wasn't going anywhere.
But yeah, he's here all week, unfortunately.
I'm here all week. So, but if you think of things they have acquired, they picked up Intel's wireless modem business for $1 billion. And if you notice that, well done. Nice bit of trivia for you. But they also bought, they spent $3 billion on Beats. I mean, why?
Because Apple are, don't tell the Beatles, but they're a music company, or music is a large part of what they do. So having Beats headphones kind of makes sense. Listen, having Beats headphones makes a lot more sense for Apple than a car.
Well, yeah. But I mean, at this stage, like they have the AirPods, sort of the first iconic true wireless buds. They also have their cans version as well. I don't think they need Beats anymore. I think they should offload it. Again, just relying on their own in-house brand to push things. If they want their own stuff, okay, keep your own stuff. If you don't need to, manage multiple brands at once. If they wanted to buy Mistral or Perplexity, I think those two brands would be RIP very, very quickly. Sure. And they would just be, Apple Intelligence brought to you by or something like that.
Exactly. All the stuff going on with Apple, actually it's not going on at the moment, but we're hoping in the next week or two that we're going to find out more about this new iPhone. And it will be, I suppose it's kind of a first.
Kinda. I mean, 2 weeks time, the 9th of September, we are getting an event Apple is calling awe-dropping. Awe-dropping, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
So this is, the speculation is this is when Apple is going to drop the iPhone 17 Air. So kind of the first time the iPhone is entering into the Air branding. So what can we expect? Well, straight off the bat, it's going to be thin and light and perhaps not as capable as its peers. Yeah. But it's the thin and light bit that's going to that's really going to sell people on it. I don't know, Dusty. We know something is coming. It's probably going to be that. Yeah. That's going to be the star of the show.
I don't hear a huge amount of people talking about the Samsung S25 Edge. Is that what they call it? Their super slim version?
Yeah.
It's kind of like it was out. It's like, ooh, look at that. But it doesn't seem to have transferred into anything in the shops. I think it was the same might happen with the iPhone 17 Air, if that's what it is, because the other talk is that it could be a new tablet. So we'll wait and see. Anyway, that's coming up on the 9th. Good week on the stock market for Nvidia.
Yeah, kind of our last story for the week, isn't it? Yeah, pretty good week for Nvidia. Wednesday, it reported revenues of 46.7 billion for the last 3 months of the year. And that is 56% up on the same period in 2024. So it's kind of hard to give investment advice for Nvidia. On one level, the only way is up. But if we are indeed in an AI bubble, maybe it's not.
No, it's not. And actually, do you know, when a company gets that big, for me, it's not a great investment because it could go down and you could have very heavy losses on that because something newer and bigger. Really kind of where you want to catch an investment is a new company and then it just explodes in growth. But of course, that's the trick. If we all knew, what we need, Biff Tanner's book? Where we can go ahead in time and say there's going to be a company called Nvidia, there's going to be another one called Apple, stick some money into them while they're cheap, and it's like, all right, we'll do that. Huge money though, and you're right.
Sorry.
You're right. We will see what happens with them with data centers and stuff. Listen, one last story. That was the second last story of the week. The last story of the week, because I mentioned at the top, was SpaceX.
Yeah.
I really want to get this in, all right, because it's just a human condition where we love to go, SpaceX had a launch there and it blew up on the stand, or it managed to get up into orbit and then it blew up, and then of course, like when they actually do it, we never mention it. We go, oh well, we won't bother. Yeah, so I want to include it here. SpaceX, their 10th mission, all right, has been a success for their big monster rocket. All right, it took off, it delivered a fake payload into space, and it returned to Earth safely. Now, when I say safely, it landed just northwest of Australia in the Indian Ocean or somewhere around there. and blew up when it landed in the water. But that was the plan. That's why they were kind of more or less dumping it in the sea. The next stage will be to actually get it to land on stand or to get it to be captured or whatever happens to be.
Okay.
They're very happy with it overall. They said the heat shield held, but it needs a little bit more work.
Yeah. Okay. So this was their Starship.
This is a Starship. Yeah, exactly. So after 10 goes, actually, do you know what? After 10 goes, that's not too bad. When you think of the monstrosity of a project that must be. And that seems to be, maybe this is the title we should put on the episode. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But build it fast and break things. I mean, Starship sums that up, doesn't it?
I think in Tesla HQ they were singing "Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now." You know it. Probably.
Listen, there we go. That's the news for this week. Niall, as always, thank you for keeping us up to date and your thoughts. Just before we get to our guest this week, I'd like to mention that our show this week is brought to you by Dell Technologies Forum, which is back live at the RDS in Dublin on Tuesday, September 23rd. They've got special guests, including Irish rugby legend Peter O'Mahony, breakout sessions on everything from AI to the modern workplace, plus one-to-one discussions with Dell experts and more. The Dell Technologies Forum, an unmissable event for business leaders, is registering now at dell.ie.
From techcentral.ie, this is the award-nominated Tech Radio from techcentral.ie.
E-waste is a major international problem. We regularly see video footage of landfills full of monitors, old computers, mobile phones, tons more. But what's incredible is that all of these discarded devices still have rare earth materials that, with the right tech, can be recycled and reused. Emma Clarke is Managing Director of Orivium, a company looking to bring a second life to devices beyond repair. She had a chat during the week with Niall Kitson about her company and her mission.
Emma, one of the issues that seems to be dominating our geopolitics at the moment is how rare earth materials have become something of a bargaining chip when it comes to negotiating peace treaties, when it comes to negotiating military supports. It's a completely different attitude towards materials that we're seeing, not just in Europe, but across the world as well, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that we've seen that play out in the Ukraine when it's come to the US and negotiating peace there. And we've seen it in DR Congo as well. And it's so interesting to think that these materials are so important geopolitically that they do become a big bargaining chip when it comes to negotiating world peace. And I think where that kind of plays into the EU is that we're looking at about 90% of the rare earths are currently imported. So from a geopolitical sensitivity perspective, that's quite a reliance on external sources for something as critical as rare earths.
Yeah, and I think it's something we've been pretty good at in the EU when it comes to awareness of recycling, that it's kind of become normal for somebody to either, get used to buying maybe something that's been refurbished to, exchanging an old device for a new one. Do you think that this is sort of a mindset that is permeating throughout the world fairly quickly? Or is it a case of, well, look, like with GDPR, the EU has been doing a pretty good job at leading the way on these things and just making either secondary markets or, recycling just kind of de rigueur, just sort of a normal way of doing business?
Yeah, well, I think in most regards, when it comes to environmental policy, I think the EU is leading the way. And we've seen that with the waste electrical and electronic equipment directives, where there is that real focus on making sure that there's a kind of cradle to grave stewardship. I have seen that people do expect to be able to recycle their e-waste and there are collection points at different places in other areas of the world. I think what is lacking is the stats to support the amount of recycling. So I think we're still kind of at a global perspective around that 17% e-waste recycling. And the rest of that e-waste is either being, sent overseas where it can be a real problem from a health perspective. And there was a World Health Organization study that said around 18 million children were at risk from informal e-waste recycling processes, as well as their developing communities. So stopping that was a big, or discouraging that is a big part of what current policy is looking at. But then we need innovation in this space, because even current processes that we have still require either high temperatures, so pyrometallurgy, or strong and toxic reagents, so hydrometallurgy. So that's where we've really tried to take a look at how important e-waste is and the metals within that, the critical materials within that are, and then work towards developing a process that is also environmentally sensitive.
Because I think one of the great kind of eye-opening visuals that we have when it comes to e-waste recycling are these just massive landfills of, old monitors, old computers, old everything, where, you assume that when you send something off for recycling that it is actually going to be, deconstructed and proper use made of. Instead, they are going into these, very dystopian looking landfills where there are sort of people exposed to chemicals and that are sort of still knocking around in there. So when it comes to the problem that you've been working with in Orivium, if you'd like to expand there on what you're doing that's particularly innovative there, because you've got two processes there. And in the background, I suppose you've also got the issue of what is the environmental impact of our process versus, just leaving something in the wild. Like, where's the net benefit?
Yes. So we really try and work to the paradigm of what we call regenerative mining. So we want all of our processes to bring regeneration both of the metals. So we don't see that the metals should be seen as a finite commodity to put in a product and then a once-off use. We want to see recycling, leasing, reuse, repurposing. And as part of making sure our process delivers that, we have tried to ensure that it's a closed loop system. So what our process does is it generates very strong kind of super chemicals via an electrolyzer. And then those chemicals or superoxidizers are used to bring or leach the metals or bring them into solution from the solid e-waste. And in that process, we can then drop out the metals and regenerate again those superoxidizers. So unlike other processes where strong reagents are used and then disposed of, we can just continually reuse them. In addition, that all happens at ambient temperatures. So it's been 5 years in the making, but our major focus is on being able to bring innovation to market to ensure that we can get those critical metals while being sensitive to the environment.
Yeah, and sort of that level of contribution to the circular economy is something that I imagine is attracting an awful lot of interest from industry, even if it's just at the level of, okay, how do we do this at room temperature, or what's the overlay, or what's the initial investment like in order to make this part of our process? Are these the sort of conversations you've been having?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the initial discussion starts with, well, what can you do? What metals can you recover? And then it very quickly gets to, well, financially, how does this look? And we're pleased to say that we've had the third parties look at the techno-economic side of things, and it is very economic. And that's really driven by the fact that we have high recoveries of metals, and we are able to recover a suite of different metals, so very valuable in the existing climate. We have been speaking with a lot of industry participants, and what's interesting is the tech companies. We originally focused on mining, but the tech companies are really taking a lead in terms of making sure that they've got that supply chain to ensure that they can, keep delivering computers and the iPhones that we're all after. So I think we may see a bit of a change in who the big guys are in this field of critical metals, driven by need. So, it'll be interesting. Yes, we have had to make sure that we are delivering a financially viable product, because then you have a sustainable environmental solution.
I suppose the reinvention of supply chains is something that's a big part of that as well. I think it's something that, coming out of the COVID experience, an awful lot of companies realised how vulnerable their supply chains were, and therefore making sure they have as much materials close, for want of a better expression, close to home as possible, especially if you can remove that initial mining element of the process. Is this something that you can see happening as well, that we're literally walking around with the next generation of our device of choice?
Absolutely. I totally see that. So really, that limiting the supply chain, the geopolitical issues, all of that leads to security of critical minerals for a place like the EU. And when you think about it, I think there's been a lot of focus on, China has a lot of these key elements that we need, and they're a very big part of that supply chain. But they're also putting all those critical minerals into neat devices and sending them our way. So if we start looking at them as a resource, then it's a real paradigm shift in where we are in the terms of the forward plan of critical metals, and making sure that we have that goal, that it's not just a feel-good target to recycle, but it's actually delivering technological leadership, I guess.
Lastly, let's look at product development from your own side as well. I mean, coming from a chemical background, you've sort of moved from one end to another. I imagine you're as happy to work with people either in industry or back in academia, or, brands big and small. Where do you find your main conversations are being had at the moment?
That's a very interesting question. I think that I have multiple people within my head. One side of things is totally devoted to our research team that still is looking at all sorts of new innovation. And we're doing that in collaboration with the University of Sydney. So we have an excellent team there. But when I think about commercialization, which is really where I sit, I'm the bridge between the technology and commercialization. Many of the conversations we're having are in some of the bigger regions. So the EU, for example, the US has become a big one. And in terms of the market sectors and industry, those tech companies, those large tech companies are really interested in innovation, because I think they see the future of, or the power in having access to all of those metals. They really see that is a key part of their supply chain, and they have the means to be able to encourage innovation in different areas. So, there's a real split between the different conversations we're having, but we are also having great conversations with miners. So some of the larger miners who are looking to be able to bring into circulation resources that are currently stranded. So, for example, copper is a really big part of our digital and electrification revolution. And 80% of remaining copper sits in sulfide ores that are currently uneconomic to produce. So our technology also is able to unlock that copper. So we are having conversations with the miners, and we are able to unlock those stranded assets in an environmentally friendly way by regenerating those chemicals we're using. So yeah, a lot of interesting conversations going on in this area, given the hot topic that critical minerals are at the moment.
And that was Niall Kitson chatting with Emma Clarke from Orivium. You can find out more about Emma and her company at oriviumglobal.com. And I'll stick that website address in the description area of this podcast.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some of the other stories that we have online that we couldn't squeeze in today, including
Donald Trump puts the boot into the EU for daring to regulate big tech. TikTok leans into AI by cutting more jobs, this time in the UK. And Salesforce customers tackle a campaign by cyber criminals.
You'll find those stories and more online at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show online and on RTE Radio 1 Extra, of course. And please do remember to share a podcast with a friend. If they're into tech and toys and all kinds of gossip, tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify or YouTube, and you'll see us as the first response. Until next time, from myself, Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson, as always, take care and have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.